I didn't tell my son about my secret $30 million fortune. Not because I didn't love him. Not because I didn't trust him. But because money has a way of exposing the truth faster than time ever can. And thank God I stayed silent. Because what happened just 1 week after his wedding showed me exactly who my son had become, and who he chose to marry. My name is Daniel Whitmore. I'm 63 years old, American, retired, and until recently, I believed I had raised a decent, grateful man. Before I go any further, let me say this. If you've ever been judged because people thought you had nothing left to offer, if you've ever been disrespected by your own family just because you stayed quiet, please subscribe and comment below where you're watching from, your city or country. And if something like this has happened to you, share your story. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to the beginning. My son Ethan got married on a warm Saturday afternoon in early spring. The venue was beautiful, white roses, crystal lights, a string quartet playing soft music in the background. Everything screamed elegance. Everything except me. I stood near the back, wearing a simple navy suit I'd owned for years. No designer label. No flashy watch. Just polished shoes and a calm smile. Most people there assumed I was just another retired old man living off a modest pension. And I let them believe that. What no one knew, not my neighbors, not my coworkers from my so-called consulting days, not even my own son, was that for over 4 decades I had quietly built, sold, and invested in logistics and infrastructure companies. I never chased headlines. I never showed off. By the time I retired, my assets, trusts, and holdings added up to just over $30 million. But after my wife passed away 8 years ago, I learned a painful lesson. Money doesn't keep you warm at night. And it certainly doesn't guarantee respect. So I made a promise to myself. I would never let money speak before character did. Ethan looked handsome that day. Nervous. Excited. When he hugged me before the ceremony, it felt quick, distracted. "You good, Dad?" he asked. "I'm proud of you," I said. "That's all that matters." He smiled, already scanning the room for someone else. That should have been my first warning. Then I met my new daughter-in-law, Melissa. She was beautiful, no doubt about that. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, a smile practiced enough to turn on and off like a switch. When Ethan introduced us, she gave me a brief handshake. "Nice to finally meet you, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "Not Dad. Not even Daniel. Just Mr. Whitmore." Her eyes flicked down to my suit, then back up, polite but uninterested. I told myself I was overthinking it. At the reception, I sat at a table near the edge of the room. Melissa's parents were seated closer to the front. I overheard bits of their conversations, investment properties, international travel, expectations for the future. At one point, Melissa's mother leaned over to someone and said, not quietly enough, "Well, at least Ethan married up. Stability matters." I pretended not to hear. When the time came for gifts, I placed a small, neatly wrapped box on the table. Inside was a simple fountain pen, engraved, handcrafted, timeless. Melissa glanced at it, forced a smile, and said, "Oh, how thoughtful." Then she placed it aside without opening it. No thank you. No eye contact. That pen alone was worth more than most people's monthly rent, but the value wasn't in the price. It was what it represented. Patience. Legacy. Permanence. Things money-hungry people rarely recognize. After the honeymoon, everything changed. Exactly 1 week later, Ethan called me. "Hey Dad," he said. "Melissa and I were thinking, maybe you could come by tomorrow. We need to talk." His tone was polite, but stiff. I drove over the next afternoon in my old sedan. The same car I'd had for years. Their house was new. Large. Suburban perfection. Melissa answered the door. "Oh," she said, surprised. "You're early." "I came when Ethan asked me to," I replied calmly. She stepped aside, but not warmly. We sat at the dining table. Ethan avoided my eyes. Melissa folded her hands neatly and smiled, the same smile she used at the wedding. Daniel, she began. We've been discussing our future. I nodded. That's good. She continued. And we feel it's important to set some boundaries. Boundaries. Such a modern word for distancing someone quietly. Ethan finally spoke. Dad, Melissa and I want our own life. No interference. No pressure. I've never pressured you, I said. Melissa tilted her head. Well, emotional presence can be pressure too. That one stung. Then she said it. Also, we think it's best if visits are planned. And maybe, not too frequent. I looked at my son. Is this what you want? He hesitated. Then nodded. Yes. In that moment, I felt something crack, not loudly, but deeply. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, I understand. As I stood to leave, Melissa added casually. Oh, and one more thing. We won't be able to help financially if anything comes up. We're just starting out. I smiled gently. I never asked, I said. But inside I realized something important. They had already decided my worth. And in their minds it wasn't much. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat in silence. I didn't feel angry. I felt tested. And I decided not to break the test. Not yet. 3 days later, Ethan called again. Dad, he said, sounding rushed. Melissa's parents are coming over this weekend. Big family dinner. Maybe you should skip this one. Skip. Like an inconvenience. I see, I replied. Don't take it the wrong way, he added quickly. It's just different dynamics. I hung up and stared at the wall. I had given my son everything except money. Time. Advice. Support. Love. And it still wasn't enough. That same evening, I made a quiet phone call. To my attorney. Everything ready? I asked. Yes, he said. Whenever you are. I looked out the window at the city lights. Good, I replied. Let's wait a little longer. Because I wanted to be absolutely certain. And I had no idea that within days something would happen. Something that would force the truth into the open. And make them regret every careless word they had spoken. I didn't tell anyone about the call I made to my attorney that night. Not because it was dramatic. But because it was necessary. When you reach a certain age, you realize something most people don't understand yet. The loudest decisions are usually the weakest ones. The strongest moves are made quietly. The next few days passed in silence. No calls from Ethan. No messages from Melissa. And strangely, that silence hurt more than the disrespect. I kept myself busy. Morning walks. Reading. Sorting old documents I'd ignored for years. Photographs of Ethan as a boy, mud on his shoes, crooked smiles, scraped knees. I wondered where I had gone wrong. 3 mornings later, it happened. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself coffee, when a sharp pain cut through my chest. At first, I thought it was indigestion. Then my vision blurred. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. I remember sitting down slowly, telling myself not to panic. But when the pain traveled up my arm, I knew. I called emergency services myself. Calm voice. Clear address. Years of discipline don't disappear just because your body betrays you. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Bright lights. Questions. Machines beeping. A nurse leaned over me. Do you have family we should call? Yes, I said. My son. I gave them Ethan's number. Then I closed my eyes. When I woke up, it was late evening. The room was quiet except for the hum of machines. A nurse noticed I was awake and smiled. You gave us a scare, she said. Mild cardiac episode. You're lucky. Lucky. I nodded. Did my son come? She hesitated. Not yet. Hours passed. Finally, close to midnight, Ethan walked in. Alone. He looked tired. Nervous. Guilty. Dad? He said softly. I searched his face. No, Melissa? He shifted uncomfortably. She had a family thing. A family thing. I didn't comment. I'm okay, I said. They caught it early. He exhaled with relief. Good. He sat down, rubbing his hands together. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he said, You didn't tell me you weren't feeling well. I didn't want to interfere, I replied gently. He winced. The doctor came in and explained my condition. Lifestyle adjustments. Monitoring. Nothing immediately life-threatening. Ethan nodded along, serious. When the doctor left, Ethan said, Melissa was worried about boundaries, but this changes things. I looked at him. Does it? He hesitated again. Yes. I mean, no. I don't know. That was the first honest thing he'd said in weeks. The next morning, Melissa finally arrived. Perfect outfit. Controlled expression. Oh my God, Daniel, she said, touching my arm lightly. This is so scary. Her eyes flicked to the machines. Then to Ethan. I smiled faintly. I'm still here. She laughed softly, nervously. Of course. Of course. She stayed exactly 12 minutes. I counted. When I was discharged 2 days later, I went back to my apartment. No one offered to stay. No one asked if I needed help. Ethan drove me home in silence. Before leaving, he said, Maybe you should think about assisted living. Just in case. Assisted living. I nodded calmly. I'll consider it. He hugged me awkwardly and left. That night, I sat alone again. But this time, something had changed. The test was no longer about patience. It was about clarity. The following week, I noticed something interesting. Melissa started calling. Not often. But more than before. How are you feeling? Are you taking your meds? Do you need groceries? Concern, finally. But it felt rehearsed. Then one afternoon, she said casually, Daniel, do you have savings set aside? For emergencies? There it was. I smiled into the phone. I've managed, I said. Why do you ask? Oh, just planning ahead, she replied quickly. Planning. I thanked her and hung up. Then I made another quiet call. To my attorney. They're circling, I said. He chuckled softly. Do you want to move forward? Not yet, I replied. I want the full picture. A few days later, Melissa invited me to dinner. A sudden change. Ethan sounded hopeful when he called. She wants to make things right. I agreed to go. Dinner was polite. Too polite. Melissa served food, asked questions, smiled often. She even called me Dad once. It sounded strange coming from her mouth. Halfway through the meal, she said, We've been talking about family legacy. Legacy. Another interesting word. And how important it is to be prepared. She continued. Especially as we get older. Ethan nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, Dad. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. I set my fork down. I appreciate that, I said calmly. Melissa leaned forward. Have you updated your will recently? The room went quiet. Ethan froze. I looked at them both. Why do you ask? Melissa smiled sweetly. Oh, no reason. Just planning responsibly. I nodded slowly. I've already taken care of it, I said. Their eyes lit up, just for a second. Then I added, It's locked. After dinner, as Ethan walked me to the door, he said quietly, Melissa's just anxious. About the future. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Son, I said, anxiety doesn't make people forget kindness. Choices do. He didn't reply. 2 days later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was a man. Mr. Whitmore, this is Richard Lawson. I represent Melissa's parents. I smiled to myself. Yes? We'd like to discuss family alignment. Alignment. I'm not interested, I replied. He paused. Well, there may be misunderstandings about your assets. Let me stop you there, I said calmly. My assets are not a group discussion. I hung up. That night I knew. The test was complete. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about what they might be missing. The next morning my attorney called. Are you ready? He asked. Yes, I replied. Schedule it. What kind of meeting? He asked. I looked at the sunlight pouring through my window. A reading, I said. But not yet for the will. A letter, he said, understanding. Yes, I replied. A letter, and a moment they'll never forget. I had no idea how fast things were about to spiral. Because before I could put my plan into motion, something unexpected happened. Something that forced Ethan to finally choose between greed and conscience. And that choice would change the course of all our lives. The morning after I told my attorney to schedule the meeting, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. Not relief. Not excitement. Clarity. When you finally accept the truth about people you love, something inside you goes quiet. The noise of hope disappears, and what remains is reason. I went about my day as usual. Walked to the park. Sat on my favorite bench. Watched parents chase toddlers and couples argue softly about nothing important. No one there knew who I was. And that anonymity felt like freedom. By the afternoon, my phone started buzzing. Ethan. I let it ring. Then a message. Dad, can you call me back? It's important. I waited an hour before responding. What's wrong? I texted. The reply came immediately. Melissa's parents want to meet you. There it was. I stared at the screen and felt no surprise at all. About what? I asked. A pause. Just family stuff. Family stuff. I agreed to meet them, but on my terms. A neutral place. Public. Quiet. A small cafe near the river. They arrived early. Richard Lawson stood when I walked in, extending his hand with a practiced smile. Melissa's mother, Janet, looked me over like a home inspector evaluating damage. Daniel, Richard said warmly. Thank you for coming. I nodded and sat. No small talk. Richard leaned forward. We believe in transparency, he said. Especially when families merge. I smiled faintly. Transparency is earned. Janet cut in. We're just concerned about Ethan and Melissa's future. Security matters. I agree, I said calmly. Richard cleared his throat. There are rumors about your past business dealings. I raised an eyebrow. Rumors travel faster than facts. Janet smiled thinly. We just want to make sure there are no surprises. I took a sip of my coffee. Oh, there are always surprises, I said. The question is who deserves them. They exchanged a glance. Richard leaned back. So you're saying there are assets? I'm saying, I replied, that my finances are not a topic for negotiation. Janet's smile vanished. Ethan is your only son, she said sharply. Surely you want him taken care of. I raised him to take care of himself, I said. The meeting ended shortly after. No agreement. No satisfaction. Just confirmation. That evening, Ethan showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked stressed. Why did you meet with Melissa's parents? He demanded. You asked me to, I replied calmly. They think you're hiding something. I shrugged. People think many things. He paced the room. Dad, this is getting uncomfortable. For whom? I asked. He stopped pacing. For Melissa, he said. She feels like you don't trust her. I looked him straight in the eyes. Has she given me a reason to? Silence. Then Ethan said something that finally broke what little illusion I had left. She's worried you'll leave everything to charity or something, and we'll be stuck. We. Not him. We. I nodded slowly. So this is about inheritance, I said. He rubbed his face. That's not fair. What's not fair? I replied quietly. Is counting money that isn't yours while the person who earned it is still breathing. He looked ashamed. But not enough. 2 days later, Melissa called me directly. Her tone was different now. Sharper. Daniel, she said, skipping pleasantries. This tension isn't healthy. No, I agreed. It isn't. We need to talk honestly. She continued. Ethan and I are building a life. We can't afford uncertainty. I smiled to myself. Life is uncertainty, I said. She sighed dramatically. You're being difficult. No, I replied. I'm being observant. She lowered her voice. Look, if there's money, it's better we know now. For planning. Planning what? I asked. A pause. Our future, she said. I ended the call politely. And immediately called my attorney. It's time, I said. The plan moved quickly after that. Not because I was angry, but because delay would only allow more manipulation. My attorney arranged a formal meeting for the following week. He advised me to call it a family discussion. I agreed. In the days leading up to it, Ethan's behavior changed. He called more often, asked about my health, even invited me to dinner again. Melissa became warm, almost affectionate. Too late. One night, Ethan stayed after dinner while Melissa stepped into another room. Dad, he said quietly, if there's something you need to tell me, now's the time. I studied his face. You didn't come to the hospital for me, I said calmly. You came when it was convenient. His eyes filled with guilt. That wasn't my choice, he whispered. And yet, I replied, it was. He had no answer. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear. From memory. Teaching Ethan to ride a bike. Helping him with college applications. Standing alone at my wife's grave while he held my arm. I wondered if love had blinded me. Or if money had blinded him. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Simple. Clean. Unassuming. The same man they underestimated. The meeting took place in my attorney's conference room. Ethan and Melissa arrived together. Her parents followed shortly after. Everyone smiled too much. My attorney began by speaking calmly about estate considerations. Melissa leaned forward eagerly. Then he stopped. Before we proceed, he said, Mr. Whitmore has something he'd like to share. All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly. I want to be very clear, I said. This is not a will reading. Disappointment flickered across Melissa's face. This, I continued, is a test. Confusion replaced the smiles. I wanted to see who would treat me like family when they believed I had nothing. Ethan swallowed hard. And who would circle me when they smelled money? Melissa stiffened. I looked directly at her parents. You failed, I said calmly. The room went silent. Melissa stood up. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You manipulated us. No, I replied. You revealed yourselves. Ethan looked torn. Dad, he said quietly, is there money? I met his eyes. Yes, I said. There is. Melissa's breath caught. But, I added, not for anyone who sees me as an account balance. Her face turned pale. My attorney closed his folder. This meeting is over, he said. As we left the room, Ethan followed me into the hallway. Dad, please, he said. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. I stopped. You knew, I replied. You just hoped I wouldn't notice. He broke down. I'm sorry, he whispered. I believed his regret. But regret doesn't erase choices. That night, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Whitmore, a voice said. This is the hospital. My heart tightened. Yes? Your test results came back. she said. There's something we need to discuss. I sat down slowly. When? I asked. As soon as possible. I looked out the window into the dark. Everything had just changed. And none of them knew yet that the biggest decision of my life was no longer about money at all. I didn't tell Ethan or Melissa about the hospital call that night. Not because I wanted to scare them, but because I needed to hear the truth first, without anyone else's voice interfering. The next morning, I drove myself to the hospital. No chauffeur. No assistant. Just me, my thoughts, and the quiet hum of the city waking up. When you've spent a lifetime building things from nothing, you learn how to face bad news standing up. The doctor was younger than I expected. Calm. Professional. Careful with words. Mr. Whitmore, he said, folding his hands, the episode you had wasn't random. I nodded slowly. There's damage, he continued. Manageable, but serious. Stress plays a role. So does time. How much? I asked. He hesitated. That depends on how you live going forward. I smiled faintly. I've lived enough to know what that means. He didn't contradict me. As I walked out of the hospital, something inside me shifted. Not fear. Urgency. Not panic. Purpose. I realized then that the clock had been ticking longer than I wanted to admit. And suddenly, every conversation, every look, every motive mattered more. When I got home, I found Ethan waiting outside my apartment. He looked exhausted. Dad, he said quickly, standing up. Where have you been? I studied his face. Concern. Real this time. I had an appointment, I replied. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded. For now. He followed me inside. Melissa wasn't with him. That told me more than he realized. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Ethan spoke. She's furious, he said quietly. I waited. She thinks you humiliated her parents. I told the truth, I replied. She thinks you're punishing us. I turned to him. Are you being punished? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then, softly, no. Ethan leaned forward. Dad, was it all a test? Yes, I said. Even the hospital? I shook my head. That was real. His eyes widened. Then why didn't you tell us? I looked at him carefully. Because when people think time is unlimited, they postpone decency. That hit him hard. That evening, Melissa called. Her voice was no longer polite. It was sharp. Defensive. You embarrassed my family, she said. I didn't mention your family, I replied calmly. I mentioned behavior. She scoffed. You played games with us. No, I said. I observed you. You made us look greedy. I paused. You made yourselves look honest, I said. She hung up. Over the next few days, the situation escalated. Melissa stopped coming over entirely. Ethan was caught in the middle, torn, stressed, losing weight. Then something unexpected happened. He moved into my apartment temporarily. Just until things cooled down, he said. I agreed. Not because I needed him, but because he needed to see something. Living together again changed things. He saw my routine. The discipline. The simplicity. No luxury. No excess. One night, he asked quietly. He looked down. I think I failed, he whispered. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You're failing now, I said gently. That means there's still time. Melissa didn't like that. She accused me of manipulating him, of turning him against her. One afternoon, she showed up unannounced. Her face was tight with anger. This is unhealthy, she snapped. You're isolating him. I stood calmly. He came here willingly, I said. She turned to Ethan. You're choosing him over your wife? Ethan hesitated, then said something I didn't expect. I'm choosing clarity, he said. Her eyes widened. That night, Ethan told me something important. She wants me to push for the will, he admitted. She says if we don't know now, we could lose everything. I closed my eyes briefly. Did you agree? I asked. No, he said. Not anymore. That was the moment I knew. My son was waking up. The next morning, my attorney called. Daniel, he said, I recommend finalizing your directives. I agree, I replied. But not everything, I added. Understood, he said. A few days later, Melissa's parents requested another meeting. This time, through lawyers. I declined. Instead, I sent a message. A relationship that begins with accounting ends with resentment. That was the last communication. That evening, I sat alone and wrote letters. Not legal documents. Personal ones. One for Ethan. One for Melissa. And one addressed to no one in particular. Just truth. A week later, I asked Ethan to come with me to the attorney's office. Melissa refused to come. Her parents didn't know. It was intentional. Inside the office, my attorney reviewed everything quietly. Trusts. Donations. Conditions. Then he looked at me. Are you ready? Yes, I said. He nodded. That night, I called Ethan into the living room. I need you to listen, I said. He sat. No interruptions. He nodded. I don't know how much time I have, I said calmly. But I know how I want to use it. His eyes filled with tears. I'm not leaving you nothing, I continued. And I'm not leaving you everything. He swallowed hard. I'm leaving you responsibility. Outside, the city lights flickered. Inside, a lifetime of assumptions collapsed. And somewhere across town, Melissa was making plans of her own. Plans that would backfire in ways she couldn't imagine. Because the final decision, the one that would define everything, was already made. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Not because everything was resolved, but because the weight of pretending was finally gone. When you stop hoping people will change and start accepting who they are, peace follows, not immediately, but honestly. The next morning, Ethan left early for work. Before he did, he stood by the door longer than usual. Dad, he said quietly, whatever happens, I'm grateful you didn't give up on me. I nodded. Gratitude is a good start, I replied. Just don't confuse it with entitlement. He smiled weakly and left. That afternoon, I received a call from Melissa. Not angry. Not sweet. Controlled. Daniel, she said, we need to talk. Privately. I considered it for a moment. Come by, I said. This evening. She arrived alone. No parents. No lawyers. Just her. She looked different, less polished, more tense. We sat across from each other in my living room. I'll be direct, she said. This situation is damaging my marriage. I waited. She continued. Ethan is pulling away from me. And it's because of you. I looked at her calmly. No, I said. It's because of you. Her jaw tightened. You never accepted me, she snapped. I observed you, I replied. There's a difference. She leaned forward. Let's stop pretending, she said. I know there's money. A lot of it. I didn't deny it. And? I asked. And Ethan deserves security, she said. We deserve clarity. I nodded slowly. Then let me give you clarity, I said. She straightened. I'm not funding lifestyles, I continued. I'm funding values. Her expression hardened. I didn't marry Ethan for money, she said quickly. No, I replied. You married him for access. That hit her. She stood abruptly. You think you're better than us, she said. No, I said calmly. I think I'm older than you. And experience teaches faster than love. She laughed bitterly. You're going to destroy this family, she said. I stood as well. Families aren't destroyed by truth, I said. They're destroyed by pretending it doesn't exist. She left without another word. That night, Ethan didn't come home. I didn't call. Some lessons require silence. 2 days later, my attorney called. Daniel, he said, everything is finalized. Good, I replied. Are you certain about the conditions? Yes, I said. They reflect reality. The following week, I received another call from the hospital. Routine follow-up. This time, the doctor smiled. Your numbers have stabilized, he said. Stress reduction helped. I nodded. I removed a major source, I replied. He chuckled. That weekend, Ethan returned. He looked tired but clearer. I told her everything, he said quietly. I waited. She accused me of choosing you over her, he continued. I told her I was choosing integrity. I said nothing. She gave me an ultimatum, he added. Her parents, the money, or you. He looked up. I chose you. For the first time in months, I felt something warm settle in my chest. Not victory. Relief. Melissa moved out that same week. There was no screaming. No drama. Just distance. Her parents stopped calling entirely. A month later, I invited Ethan to my attorney's office. Just him. No surprises. No audience. My attorney laid out the documents carefully. Trust structures. Foundations. Educational funds. Then he slid one envelope across the table. This is for you, he said. Ethan opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. My handwriting. Son, if you're reading this, it means you chose character over comfort. That choice matters more to me than blood or obligation. You will inherit enough to live freely, but not enough to forget who you are. The rest will go where it's earned through service, not entitlement. Remember this. Money is a tool, not a reward for proximity. Ethan's hands trembled. I don't deserve this, he whispered. That's why you're receiving it, I replied. Outside the office, he hugged me. Not quickly. Not awkwardly. Fully. I almost lost myself, he said. You found yourself, I replied. That's harder. Months passed. Life slowed. Melissa filed for divorce. No contest. No claims. Her parents disappeared from our lives entirely. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they were shocked by how things turned out. Shock fades. Lessons don't. One afternoon, Ethan joined me at the park. The same bench. The same quiet. I used to think wealth was protection, he said. It's exposure, I replied. He nodded. I'm glad you didn't tell me, he said. So am I replied. Later that evening, alone again, I reviewed my final arrangements. Charities. Scholarships. Foundations. Not to make a statement, but to leave something meaningful behind. I thought about all the people who never saw me, who dismissed me, who underestimated silence. And I smiled. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The people who rush toward your money will never walk beside your soul. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give your children is not wealth, but the chance to prove who they really are. If you stayed till the end, thank you. And if this story touched you, subscribe, comment where you're watching from, and share your experience. Because somewhere out there, another quiet soul is being tested. And they deserve to know they're not alone.